From the possible location of Noah's Ark to a Roman baby disposal that proves the Romans were actual savages, plus the origin of apples, here are 10 amazing archaeological discoveries. Noah's Ark Found. Topping off today's list of amazing archaeological discoveries is Noah's Ark. That's right, I'm talking about the infamous Ark from the Bible. According to a recent article from The Sun, experts believe they have snapped underground images of what could be Noah's Ark in eastern Turkey. The images in question appear to show something that could be a boat buried beneath rock near some mountains. As you can imagine, skeptics are not convinced, and to be quite honest, the photos really do just look like a ship-shaped rock. But a lot of other people are 100% behind the find. The pictures of the supposed Ark were obtained by sending electrical signals underground using cables, and it's true it does kinda look like a giant boat in the collected images. According to the legend, Noah is the guy who loaded 2 of every animal onto a giant ark in the early chapters of the Bible to save them all from apocalyptic flooding. And in the book of Genesis, eastern Turkey is in fact the region in which Noah's Ark eventually stops after the Great Flood. There are obviously a million things wrong with the legend if you want to look at it factually, but if there is indeed a massive boat hidden under the rock, it would be one heck of a phenomenal coincidence. Have you ever dug up something unique in your own backyard? Perhaps an old bullet casing or even an old gas can from decades ago? Some people might have even found something valuable. It can happen. There is often treasure in the most unexpected places. Let me know in the comments, then subscribe if you haven't already. More exciting videos are coming out every day and you won't want to miss them. The First Leper. Back in 2009, researchers discovered the very first case of leprosy. For those that don't know, leprosy is basically the zombie disease. We've pretty well eradicated it from the world, but for thousands of years it was a very terrible disease that caused horrible skin lesions all over the sufferer. Leprosy is now curable, but for most of human history, lepers were ostracized and forced out of their own communities. Now, scientists have the bones of the very first one, or at least it's the oldest known to us so far. The skeleton is 4,000 years old and it was found in India. A new study shows that it bears the earliest archaeological evidence of leprosy ever. Not only that, but it's the first evidence of the disease being in prehistoric India. It's giving scientists a bit of insight into how the nasty disease spread across early human history. It's now believed that the disease likely originated in Africa and then spread out of Africa around 40,000 years ago, where it eventually eclipsed the entire human population. This isn't really revolutionary science, but it's still impressive that they found such an old leper in India. Oh yeah, and they found it buried in Rajasthan. In Hindu tradition, the only people who are buried are outcasts, pregnant women, young children, victims of magic, victims of curses, and of course, lepers. Desert kites. Desert kites are not what they sound like. These are actually ancient stone structures from about 6,000 years ago that were found in the Middle East. They were named desert kites because they kinda look like kites, but in fact, these weird stone formations were used to funnel migrating gazelles into traps where they would then be killed and ultimately butchered. This is according to a new study discussed in National Geographic. One of the best examples of desert kites is at an archaeological site in northeastern Syria. There are stone walls constructed that funneled wild animals into giant killing pits. It's basically like building low walls to force animals to fall into a giant pit full of spikes. This is the Middle Eastern equivalent to the North American indigenous people driving buffalo off the edges of its cliffs. It's another very early example of mass killing strategies employed by the earliest humans. It may be some of the earliest evidence of the extirpation of large animals in the Middle East, even before the invention of firearms in the 20th century. Headless Vikings. Vikings just aren't that scary without their heads, but a pile made of Viking heads would be terrifying. A recent archaeological discovery in Britain has unveiled a massive burial pit full of executed Vikings. Roughly 50 skeletons were found inside of an old quarry pit in Dorset back in 2009 during the construction of a relief road. Every last skeleton has been decapitated, with all their bodies thrown inside shallow graves and all their heads piled up to the side. It's a pretty grisly image to look at now, even if it is just a bunch of skeletons. But just imagine what it would have looked like at the time of its creation with a giant pile of 50 heads. It's absolutely gruesome. According to the Vintage News, the individuals found inside the pit would have been executed at the side of the grave, stripped naked, then beheaded. This happened sometime between AD 910 and AD 1030, meaning it was only about 1,000 years ago. The Vikings were probably executed by the local Anglo-Saxons. Unfortunately, archaeologists don't currently know why it happened, what exactly went down, or any of the finer details, but it was very likely that the Vikings were captured during a raiding attempt. Saksayawaman. Saksayawaman is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in Peru. It's believed that Saksayawaman was constructed by the early pre-industrial Incans. It's a complex with 3-tiered walls and is considered one of the most complex marvels of engineering for its time. Some of the biggest blocks used to construct this ancient place fit together so tightly that the Incans did not even need to use mortar. They essentially crafted Lego blocks that fit together like a glove, but that's not the only reason Saksayawaman is so impressive. Over the 3 sections of the remaining walls, you can see that some of these stones are of a preposterous size. It may not look that large in the photos, but it's positively huge. All the stones are square or rectangular, and there's absolutely no consistency to their exact dimension. It's as if each piece were carved custom to fit in a particular space inside the wall, which in itself would have required magnificent planning and engineering skills. Unfortunately, the rest of the complex, which could have been composed of towers, battlements, and who knows what else, was utterly destroyed by the Spanish when they conquered the nearby city of Cusco and began to basically destroy the indigenous culture of Peru like they did all over Latin America. Tomb of the Sunken Skulls. The Tomb of the Sunken Skulls is an absolute enigma. It all started a few years ago when archaeologists were excavating a prehistoric lake bed in Sweden. Of course, the lake bed was dry when they started excavating it. In any case, the archaeologists stumbled upon the foundations of an ancient stone structure sealed at the bottom of the lake. After a bit of digging, they unearthed the Tomb of Sunken Skulls. Inside the small structure, they found animal bones, stone tools, and 10 skulls that were 8,000 years old. It's unclear exactly what happened at the site, but an 11th skull was later found with fragments of one of the other skulls deliberately lodged inside of it. That is some pretty nasty stuff, but it gets even worse. Researchers believe that before the 11 people were thrown inside the tomb, their bodies were staked and then they were set on fire. Could this be the oldest example of mass killings of vampires? Or is it just another example of ancient savagery? Whatever it is, this is one nasty discovery. The origin of apples. How would you like to know where apples come from? As you probably know, before globalization and trade, certain plants, fruits, vegetables, and flowers only grew in their own personal part of the globe. Of course, now you can grow anything pretty much anywhere, but that was not always the case. If you've ever just kind of accepted that apples grow in your backyard because they're supposed to, you'd better listen up. Recent archaeological evidence is saying that apples actually began their long history in the mountains of Kazakhstan. This is one of the only places in the world that would have had apples growing naturally thousands of years ago. Apples may even have been one of the rare surviving plants after the last ice age. This new fossil evidence is also saying that apples can be traced back to the original Silk Road trading routes. It's likely that farmers cultivated them initially in Kazakhstan and then traded them along the Silk Road from east to west. This is how apples became extremely popular in China as well as Europe, and how they eventually made their way over to North America. Of course, this happened quite some time ago. Don't forget that Eve eats an apple in the Bible, while in the Arabian Nights, a magical apple is used to cure any illness. And even in Norse mythology, the golden apple can give a god immortality. There's no denying the special magic of the apple, and it's pretty cool to think that it all started in just a few hills of the sparsely populated country of Kazakhstan. Badger digs up medieval burial ground. When it comes to archaeological discoveries, we usually have archaeologists to thank, but this next story is all thanks to badgers. A badger living in the countryside of Germany recently uncovered an incredible 12th century burial ground all by itself. If that's not incredible enough already, the burial ground contained at least 2 Slavic warlords. It all started when 2 sculptors who lived in the area noticed the badger digging in a peculiar spot. The sculptors went to investigate and they saw a pelvic bone sticking out of the dirt. Later, a rare archaeological dig went down and a whole lot of very cool things were discovered. They found one of the warriors was buried with a double-edged sword and a huge bronze bowl at his feet. This type of bowl would have been used in ancient times to wash your hands before eating. This suggests that the man buried was part of the upper class. The same warrior was also adorned with an intricate belt buckle in the shape of the Omega symbol with a snake at each end. The warrior was incredibly well equipped, whoever exactly he was. Another grave uncovered at the site contained a woman with a coin in her mouth. According to some ancient religious beliefs, people who were buried with a coin in their mouth were able to pay the mythical ferryman to transport them across the river and into the world of the dead. Tomb of the Silver Dragons. The Tomb of the Silver Dragons was discovered in Mongolia. It's one of the most incredible archaeological discoveries ever found in the country. It was likely built for nobles of the Xiongnu Empire, which thrived at a time when nomadic people dominated the Eurasian steppes between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD. This empire constantly was at war with the Han Dynasty of China. To defend against this Mongolian menace, China eventually built the Great Wall. The Tomb of the Silver Dragons was excavated by a special team from the Ulaanbaatar University, and it was found to contain some very cool relics from that time period. There were wooden boxes filled with silver, jade belt hooks, and a particularly valuable pair of gilded silver dragons. There were actually 2 tombs discovered. The smaller tomb contained a man buried with his horse-drawn carriage, 15 severed horse heads, a sword decorated with jade, and 19 silver ornaments, all of which depicted a unicorn deity. The only thing researchers don't know is who exactly the tomb belonged to. Roman baby disposal. Baby disposal is not a pleasant topic, but it might have been quite a common thing back in the days of ancient Rome. An archaeologist named Ross Voss made a rather gruesome discovery while exploring the old seaport of Ashkelon in modern Israel. He was checking out the ruins of the city's sewer when he stumbled upon a bunch of small bones that he first thought belonged to a chicken. However, it soon became apparent that all these little bones belonged to babies, and they all dated back to the era of the Roman Empire. It's now considered to be the most significant mass grave of infants ever found on Earth, and unfortunately it could be proof that the ancient Romans were guilty of rampant baby killing. This is nothing new, as it's been a theory for quite some time. Archaeologists have always suspected that Romans did some pretty nasty stuff to their babies, but now we have the physical evidence. Even though the Romans were sophisticated in a lot of ways, they had some pretty backward ideas about childbirth. They were so detached from babies that they were able to simply throw them into the sewers or just leave them outside so that they would die of exposure. They felt literally no guilt about it because they didn't think it was a crime. Of course, it could also be just that the death was thought of as part of life, and dying wasn't as big of a deal back then. This particular baby disposal was found beneath an area known as an ancient red light district. Archaeologists theorized that when the ladies of the night became pregnant, they simply carried the baby to term and then disposed of them beneath the exact same place in which they were conceived. And this is why there were so many baby bones discovered in the sewer. Very sad, but absolutely true. Which of these discoveries is the most amazing or disturbing? How do you feel about the origin of apples? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching. If you have not already, don't forget to subscribe. See you again soon for another fun video.